Hello, everyone. Welcome to this online information event about the judicial assistant role at the Supreme Court. My name's Rebecca Fry, and I'm the head J at the court and the J to Lord Reed. I'm really delighted that so many of you have given up your evenings to join our webinar. We'll kick off with presentations by two of the Supreme Court's justices, Lord Sales and Lady Rose, who will share their perspective on the JA role. We'll then hear from two of the court's current JAs, Sam Dayan, who's the JA to Lady Rose, and Manat Mali, who's the JA to Lord Hamlin. I'm also really pleased to welcome Stephanie Needleman, who's the Legal Director at Justice and who was a Supreme Court JA in the 2016 to 17 legal year. Then last but not least, we'll hear from Chris Mail, who's the court's head of HR. We'll end the session tonight with a Q&A, so please do type any questions that you have into the meeting chat as we go. Our speakers won't answer questions during their presentations, but we'll be really pleased to answer anything that you want to ask us at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lord Sales.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening to learn some more about being a judicial assistant at the Supreme Court. I've been asked to explain why I'd encourage you to apply to be a judicial assistant. I really do think being a JA at the Supreme Court is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see the inner workings of our highest apex court, to see how the law gets made at this highest level, to see how the justices interact with each other. It's also a fantastic opportunity to work with the justices. The way our system works is that each judicial assistant that we appoint is assigned to a specific justice, and you will find that you develop a very close working relationship with your justice. Each justice asks for different things to be done, which they find useful for their work, and judicial assistants have a lot of responsibility in undertaking research, talking to their justice about how they think the cases that we're dealing with should be dealt with, decided, and just getting a sense of how the judges here think about things. The other thing that I would emphasize is that it is an opportunity to see absolutely the top advocates in our country performing before the court, which is something which is enormously instructive. We're very fortunate here in that in every case we have, on the whole, excellent representation, and it's a way for young lawyers to learn how advocacy should be done at the highest level and in an appellate setting such as the Supreme Court. Now, in terms of eligibility to be a judicial assistant, the technical requirements are posted on the Supreme Court website. Broadly speaking, we are looking for young lawyers with very high order legal skills. There's no getting away from the fact that we're looking for people with proven ability in doing law, because at the end of the day, judicial assistants are appointed to help the justices, and we need people who are functioning as lawyers at a very high level to do that. And we make no apology for that. And indeed, you'll get the most out of being a judicial assistant if you're a good lawyer already. We look for something of a balance with young, newly qualified lawyers being the majority that we look for, partly because of their maturity and acquisition of practical skills, which they may have acquired during pupillage or during their training contracts. And there are some responsibilities of judicial assistants at the Supreme Court where we do need to call on people with that little bit more experience. But this year, for the first time, we've somewhat expanded our selection criteria so that we're looking for people with very good law degrees who may be carrying on a postgraduate degree in law at the moment, where they'll have graduated from that degree by the time of the appointment starting in October. And we will be looking to recruit people from that cohort as well, although, as I say, with the balance being in favour of looking to recruit early career qualified professionals. The last thing that I've been asked to talk about is what we expect judicial assistants to do in helping us with our work. Now, as I mentioned before, each justice has a judicial assistant assigned to them. There are some things that judicial assistants do for the court as a whole, such as preparing what are called bench memos to help the justices deal with permission to appeal applications in particular. But when you're working with your individual justice, the individual justice will have their own requirements and ways of working, which they will expect you to assist with. So speaking for myself, my own experience with my judicial assistants is that I offer quite a wide range of help in what I do. I will ask my judicial assistant to prepare summary notes on the permission to appeal applications that I have to consider. I use that as a sense check. I'll make up my own mind, but I will definitely take into account my judicial assistant's views to see if they accord with mine, and maybe to look again if they don't. My judicial assistant prepares me a memorandum for each substantive appeal hearing that I have, giving their views, and I give careful attention to what they have to say about that. And many of the justices have speaking engagements, giving lectures about the law and so on. And I use my judicial assistant very strongly to help me do the research, come up with ideas for lectures, and help draft the lectures at an early stage. I should say that judicial assistants don't assist the judges in drafting judgments. We're very careful to ensure that we do that for ourselves. But almost everything else that we do, the judicial assistant is there helping us. The other thing I do with my judicial assistant is at the end of each hearing, I have an extensive debrief session going through the hearing, asking them what they've made of the arguments, seeking their views, commenting on the advocacy. And so it's something of a learning experience, I hope, for the judicial assistant, at the same time as they're providing us with invaluable assistance for what we do. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Rebecca. I encourage you all to give serious thought to applying. I think when you hear from the judicial assistants, they will tell you what a great job it is and how very interesting. And I'll hand back to Rebecca now. Enjoy the rest of the presentations.
Thank you very much, Lord Sales. We'll now hear from Lady Rose.
Hello, good evening. And I'm also joined with Lord Sales in welcoming you to this seminar. And I'm very glad that so many people are enthusiastically thinking about this job. It is one of those rare jobs which really is a win-win for both sides. We find the work of the judicial assistants really very helpful in getting through the quite heavy workload that we have, many different demands on our time. And I think they really enjoy it, both their interactions with their justice and the other justices, and also they always form a very friendly cohort themselves. And I think they often make friendships which continue onwards into their professional lives. What do I use my JA for? It's really as a sounding board for the ideas that I have when I'm preparing for a hearing, or where I'm preparing for my permission to appeal application meetings, where we have to go through deciding which appeals we're going to accept. What we're looking for is also versatility in terms of generic legal skills that you can show that you can turn to any subject, because the work of the justices here, both their work for the Supreme Court and their work on the Judicial Committee and the Privy Council is hugely varied. We really deal with any topic of the law that you can think of. And so even if our JAs have qualified in a particular role or particular department or specialising in a particular set of chambers, we need them to have transferable skills that they can turn their attention, as we have to do, to any particular area of the law outside what they may think of as their current expertise. I also use my JA for writing lectures, and that's a skill that they have to have with a sense of humour. Often we're speaking to a wide range of audiences over the years. So, for example, last week I gave a lecture at All Souls College in Oxford, which was primarily to a very high-level academic audience. Next Monday, I'm going to speak at a girls' school in Portsmouth. So the JA, like me, has to be able to adapt their writing skill and the seriousness or levity of the lecture to the particular occasion. So that kind of sensitivity to what's required on a particular occasion is very important. As Lord Sales says, we don't expect the JAs to get involved in actually judgment writing, but there are a lot of little points that crop up. So when I'm writing a judgment, I might well put in italics, Sam, can you just check out what did the counsel actually say? I remember him saying something at the hearing, but I can't, my notes aren't very clear. Can you just check back on what they said? Or can you check back when this particular statutory provision was introduced? So there are a lot of little queries that crop up that then help me to flesh out the judgment, and I can incorporate those helpful answers in what I'm doing. So what are we looking for in a JA? Well, clearly intellectual ability and versatility of thought is one of the most important things. We tend to use JAs for a lot of online research, so they do need to have a familiarity with the commonly used databases for legislation, different legislation, what was in force at a particular time, finding out case law, finding out whether a particular case we're interested in has been commented on in any academic articles. So they have to have a familiarity with using LexisNexis, Westlaw, those sorts of databases. We also need for them to be discreet. It's important for me to be able to talk freely about the discussions that I've had with my fellow justices. Sometimes I disagree with the justices, or I'm agreeing with some and disagreeing with the others. And we do tend to explain that kind of thing to our justices, but that kind of what goes on in the deliberations, what goes on in the debates between judges when they're coming to their decision as to what the end result of the case is going to be, those are all highly confidential. And so we need to be very confident that the JAs won't go home and say, oh, you never guess what I heard them say today, or I know what the result of this case is before it's going to be handed down. That is all very strictly confidential, and we do rely on their discretion for that kind of thing. What advice would I give somebody who's thinking of applying? Make sure that you show that you can demonstrate the skills that I've been discussing. Also, we're very interested in what your experience has been so far, and that's not only your academic experience or your work experience, but also we're interested in the whole person and what you're going to be like to work with for the year. And so it's useful if people can draw on their experiences in their hobbies or other kinds of things that they've done, which show that they're a rounded person, they're likely to be interesting and fun to work with. And also give some thought to how you explain why you're proposing to take this year out of your trajectory of your career, if you have one, to come here. How you think this is going to help you in your future plans, how clear you are as to how you see your career moving forward, because we can often learn a lot from people by seeing where they see their career is going and how carefully they've thought about what they can give to the job, but also what their experience here is going to be able to give them. So those are the points that I would like to highlight.
Thank you very much, Lady Rose. We'll now hear from Lady Rose's JA, Sam.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good evening, everyone. So I've been asked to provide a bit more colour about what JAs do on a daily basis, and then speak briefly about how I have found the role. So to briefly introduce myself, I joined the court from a position in government, where I worked as a lawyer in the energy department, advising primarily on clean heat policy. And before that, I trained in the city and worked for a year as an associate in a commercial litigation team. So in terms of the work the JAs get involved in, there's a nice mixture between individual work for justice and general work on behalf of the court. I think Lady Rose and Lord Sales have spoken pretty extensively about how JAs help individual justices. So I might focus on the latter of those, so work for the court more generally, which I found to be equally as interesting and important. So one job is writing the bench memos that Lord Sales mentioned earlier. So parties typically don't have a right to appeal to the court, and so they write a short application arguing why their case raises important arguable issues. And the JAs will write a document summarising that application, as well as the accompanying lower court's decisions. And the nice thing about this is that the applications to the court, and these are made both to the Supreme Court and the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, cover the full gamut of the legal spectrum. And so you're exposed to all sorts of wonderful and weird disputes and areas of law that you won't have come across before. And it's a really excellent way to broaden your legal knowledge and gain an insight into how the appellate process works. You see how the issues are narrowed and refined as they climb the judicial chain. Another work stream which I wasn't familiar with before joining the court is what you might call, I suppose, cross-jurisdictional judicial dialogue and collaboration. So judges in different countries really do talk to one another, and this can take various forms, one of which is bilateral meetings. So, for example, last term, judges from the Court of Cassation, which is one of France's 4 apex courts, visited the Supreme Court. And later this week, there's a delegation from the Dutch Supreme Court coming. And at those meetings, judges will present papers to one another on legal topics of interest. And as a JA, you might be asked to help prepare a paper and can sit in on the discussion. And the court also regularly receives requests for information from various judicial networks. So, for example, another European court might ask how a particular convention right is interpreted by UK courts. And so there's the diversity of work means that if you have a particular interest that you'd like to pursue, there's a good chance that there will be an outlet for it. But that's not to say you're locked away in a library for a year. So there's no getting away from the fact that the job involves lots of reading. Just the nature of an apex court is that by the time the case gets here, there's a lot of accompanying paper. But there really are opportunities to get involved in a broader range of work. So, for example, the court runs various outreach and access to justice programs, which includes a pretty extensive moot offering and the Bridging the Bar program. So, and you as a JA, you are able and encouraged to get involved in all of that. And so briefly, as for how I'm finding it, I'm really enjoying it. Everything that Lady Rose and Lord Sales said about the role offering a privileged insight into how appellate court works is absolutely true. One particular positive I'd highlight is the working environment, which I found to be really supportive and pleasant. So the JAs all sit together in a big room right at the top of the court. And if you're used to working in a secluded office cubicle or perhaps rooms and chambers, I think it makes for a very nice change. There's always someone who's happy to have a chat about a point you might be struggling with. And that's particularly valuable as the JAs have a really broad mix of professional backgrounds. So both geographically, you have JAs from all of the jurisdictions in the UK, and also in terms of the private law, public law split. So I'd say it's a nice nurturing atmosphere, which is really conducive to learning and improving your legal skills. And the other nice thing about being sat in a room is that the justices will often come by after hearings, and they'll give you their views on the issues and the advocacy. And so I'd say you're very much made to feel as part of the court and not just a temporary visitor. And I should add that there's also a beautiful and very well-resourced library right at the centre of the building. So if you want peace and quiet, that's also very much an offer. I think those are probably my 5 minutes. So I will hand back to Rebecca. And yeah, I would thoroughly recommend anyone considering applies for the role.
Thanks so much, Sam. We'll now hear from Manat, who's the J to Lord Hamblin.
Hi, everyone. Very excited to go after Sam. Sam and I work closely together every day, and it's always really great hearing from other Js about what they're getting from the experience. I'm going to discuss briefly what I enjoy about the role, and then I'm also going to discuss what surprised me and what I wish I'd known before I applied. By way of background, prior to coming to the court, I was also doing commercial litigation at a city law firm, and had a desire really to experience other areas of the law and engage in research in novel and new areas for myself. That's probably actually what I've enjoyed most about the position over the last kind of 6 or 7 months. The types of cases that come to the court involve niche and complex questions of law, but the breadth of the questions that come to the court is really wonderful. You might work on a shipping dispute one week, a tort case the next, a criminal case from the Privy Council the week after. And what that provides is a great opportunity to really throw yourself back into what almost feels like the study of law again, where every week you're engaging with new topics and difficult questions in complex areas. And so for myself, Lord Hamblin is a specialist shipping lawyer, and I myself knew very little about shipping law prior to starting the year, but it's proved absolutely fascinating to experience this novel area of the law. And I would say that all of the JAs have had that experience where kind of week on week you're engaging with new areas. What's probably surprised me most about the role is that the justices really do care what we think, which perhaps was a bit naive for me to assume otherwise, but I found that in practice and otherwise, you're often working with people who are at a very similar level of seniority to yourself. But it's been truly invaluable to be able to pass drafts of my work or research and to engage in conversations about cases or permission to appeal applications with justices who are obviously at the top of their profession, but they are open-minded and interested to know what you think. And so you often have to go away and develop your own opinion as to what you think of the cases before you. And I think that's been really exciting, but also slightly surprising, given that I'm still very junior and perhaps I hadn't expected that before starting. One of the things I wish I'd known before applying, and kind of as some general advice for the interview process, you might be given a topic or a case to discuss beforehand. And I think it's really important in the interview more generally that you employ your legal and critical thinking skills, and that you, as Lady Rose was saying earlier, try to think of all of the cases and examples in your life where you've demonstrated good research skills, good legal reasoning, although reasoning generally is also helpful. And then also kind of talking about why it is that you want to do the role and what skills and attributes you seek to develop from it. So that might be witnessing some of the best advocacy in the country. It might be getting the chance to draft research notes or bench memos. It also might be that you love the law and are looking to kind of change direction or focus on a specific area, and you'd like exposure to that. So I think when you go into the interview, really thinking about all of the experiences that you've had and all of the skills that you've developed, and trying to make those known to the interview panel, right? Preparing well. I think that's my 5 minutes as well. So I'm going to hand back to you, Rebecca.
Thanks so much, Manette. We'll now hear from Stephanie, who is a former JA and will be able to share her experience with the benefit of hindsight. Stephanie. Sorry, Stephanie, I think you're muted.
I'm muted. The absolute rookie error of using a webinar. Apologies for that. I'm absolutely delighted to come back and being asked to speak about my experience as judicial assistant. Again, just a bit of background about me. There seems to be a common theme. I was previously a commercial solicitor as well. I promise you that there are other backgrounds available for JAs. Lots of my fellow JAs came from the bar and had just completed a master's before I joined as a JA. I'm now the legal director at Justice. We're a law reform and human rights organisation, and we look to make the justice system fairer and accessible for everybody by making recommendations for reform, analysing legislation and briefing parliamentarians, and intervening in cases as third-party interveners. I've been asked to speak about why I would encourage someone to be a JA, some of the highlights of my year, and how it's helped me in my career. So why I would encourage somebody to be a JA? I mean, a lot of the reasons have already been discussed. As Lord Sales and others have mentioned, it's an incredible insight into the inner workings of the court. You get a brilliant understanding of what advocacy looks like. That's obviously through reading and listening to submissions from top advocates. But I think crucially, not only that, you get a real sense of what the justices find persuasive and why. And then you get the chance to practice your advocacy skills with some of the brightest and best legal minds in the country when you discuss your cases with your justice. You're obviously asked to do a lot of research, so you get to hone your research skill. And again, you have a very discerning audience to do that with. And obviously, by virtue of the types of cases that the court gets, it's complex, novel areas of law of general public importance. Also, you get to meet some amazing people, not just getting to know the justices, but as Sam mentioned, your fellow JAs who are all fantastic and share a really good approach to work and discussions between you. And also they all go on to have like amazing careers. So you get to build a network of people across the legal profession who you carry on being friends with, and I'll go and speak about how I've also carried on benefiting from that in my professional career as well. A couple of the highlights, I think, from my time as a JA. I was there during the Miller 1 case, and it was absolutely amazing to be involved in even just a little way in something of such constitutional importance, and having that behind the scenes insight felt particularly privileged in that instance. As I mentioned already, getting to know the other JAs. And finally, I think in particular, doing some of the extrajudicial, helping the justice with some of the extrajudicial work that was mentioned previously. So writing speeches and papers for the justices. And it's really challenging to try and write something in the voice of your justice at the beginning. But then when you get it right, it's incredibly satisfying. So moving on to how being a JA has helped in my career. Advocacy has been mentioned numerous times, and Justice as an organisation advocates for policy and legislative change to make the justice system fairer and more accessible to all. So whilst this isn't core advocacy, the principles are the same regardless. Regardless of whether you're writing submissions to the court or writing a briefing paper or a report, whether you're standing in front of judges or in front of ministers and parliamentarians trying to convince them to adopt your policy or amendment to a piece of legislation, those principles and the skills I've learned there definitely carry through to the work that I do now. I mentioned before the network that you build, being a judicial assistant. Justice works by bringing together experts in particular areas of law to come up with recommendations for reform. So having a network of former JAs who are now brilliant lawyers in different areas of law is absolutely fantastic. And I've also called on a few for some pro bono advice and representation, as well as recently one of my fellow JAs reached out to Justice to ask us if we would consider if they would be interested in intervening in a case that they were involved in, which we went on to successfully do. Finally, it's been mentioned as well by others, the ability to turn your hand to any area of the law is really important in the work I do. Justice works across the justice system. It means that we look at a whole range of areas of law, and myself and my team of lawyers may well not have practiced in those areas. So being able to get to grips with new areas of law is particularly helpful. I think I will leave it there, but thank you very much. And I very much encourage you all to apply.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. So last but not least, we'll hear from Chris Mail, who is the court's head of HR.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time this evening. So lovely to hear from Stephanie and Sam and Manat and Lord Sales and Lady Rose. I've been at the court for 12 years now and recruited well over 100 judicial assistants and truly met some amazing lawyers. And some of them, I hope, will one day go on to be members of the judiciary. And I'm really confident that that will happen. As Stephanie said, everyone goes on and utilises the experience and will have success in whichever direction they head forward. It's a very small organisation to work for. We're not part of the Ministry of Justice, and you'll get to know everyone at the court if you apply and if you're successful. And it's also a very exciting time to join the court because we're halfway through a change programme where we will be launching a new website later this year and have a new case management system. So the new cohort of JAs who join, they'll be involved in that, and that will be certainly something that will make a big difference to the way we operate with our court users. This year for the judicial assistants, we're using a new contextual recruitment system with an organisation called RARE, and that is there to support our aim to encourage a wide range of people to apply from different backgrounds and different routes into law. The closing date for applications is the 31st of March. So there's plenty of time to get your application form together. Do allow enough time to apply. Don't leave it till the last day. It will take a bit of time to go through, and we do ask lots of questions, including some which are asking more competency behaviour type questions, where we're asking about real examples that demonstrate how you meet the criteria. Interviews will take place in May at the Supreme Court, and these are in person with Lady Rose and Lord Sales, myself and Rebecca. I need to stress as well, you do need to have the right to work in the UK without restrictions, as we do not sponsor any visas. Successful candidates are then invited to a reception evening in early July, and this is when the candidates find out which justice they've been assigned to work with, and they have an opportunity to meet with the current JAs. And as you've heard tonight, the role of the judicial assistant is very varied, and it's really true to say that no 2 days are ever the same. You'll face interesting legal issues, a challenging but stimulating workload, and be required to think on your feet. Competition and the caliber of those that apply each year is always very high. You need to have an excellent academic record and at least a 2:1 degree to apply, and at least 2 years substantial legal studies post-graduating, such as work obtaining a master's degree or a PhD in law. Or be a qualified lawyer in the UK with experience as a pupil barrister or a trainee solicitor experience or work experience directed to qualification as a lawyer in the UK. The criteria this year is harder for me to explain than ever before. It is a little bit more confusing because we've opened it up for academics. I think, though, we'll be predominantly still looking to recruit qualified lawyers in the UK, but we also have the challenge to find the very best legal minds. So that's why the Justices wanted to open it up to academics as well as qualified lawyers in the UK. We need people that are familiar with the UK law, but we also need a mix of legal specialisms. So we try to avoid having everyone in the same area of law, just as we do when we recruit the Justices. We also look for diverse educational backgrounds, a good gender mix, a mix of solicitors and barristers, and this year academics. Ideally, one Scottish lawyer to complement the dynamic of the team. And don't forget, we also want everyone to get on with their justice, and we want everyone to get on with their fellow JAs and the rest of the court. So we're looking for really good, nice, respectful, considerate people. And I'm really pleased to say, I think each year we manage to achieve that. So I don't know how we do it, but those people that are applying are the right caliber and the right people for the court. You need to be confident in your legal thinking, and I think, as Lady Rose alluded to, the Justices do quite like it when a JA occasionally disagrees with them, or at least has a different legal opinion to share on a case or point of law. Can be a little daunting at first, but the Justices do relish the opportunity to consider different aspects and different points of law. The year goes very quickly, and I'll just highlight just a couple of highlights that JAs have given me over the years. So an obvious one, at high-profile cases. We don't know next year what cases will come our way, but when we get a high-profile case, it's so impressive to see how everyone pulls together and works as a collective team, and then we can also watch as that develops. The Bridging the Bar internship is each November, and Sam has mentioned that. Nobody's mentioned our cafe and our lovely chocolate muffins, but that's another highlight that some mentioned to me. Our legal bake-off that we have, the trip to Washington that we give the opportunity to visit the US Supreme Court. We have staff meetings where JAs give concise judgment summaries. This has been alluded to as well, really encourage the JAs to stick together after they've had the experience of the court, and that really works well both in lasting friendships and supporting your legal work, because it means you've got a network of people that you can trust that might work in different specialisms, different areas of the law, and I think that network continues for the rest of your career. I think I'll stop there because we've reached enough time, but we're happy to take any questions if there are any. I hope you found it inspiring, and I do hope if you meet the criteria, you're happy to apply. Thank you.
Wheels.
Wonderful. Thanks so much to all of our speakers so far. So we'll open it up to questions. The first question that's come through, I think, fits well with Chris's presentation. It asks, would I need to be a qualified barrister in the UK, or would my credentials of being a barrister in my home country suffice? So Chris, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I think as I've just said, you need to be you need to have the right to work in the UK without restrictions, and we are also looking for people that have got experience of UK law. So we wouldn't be able to sponsor if you haven't got the right to work in the UK now.
Wheels.
Not too disappointing, but that's what we say.
Thanks so much. I should say that all of the eligibility criteria are published on the court's website. My colleagues will drop the link into the chat, so please do check that carefully and then consider how you might fit in with those criteria. If you have any specific questions about your individual circumstances, we probably won't go into them this evening, but you can email the recruitment email address, which is also available on the court's website. So please do get in touch if anything is unclear. So the next question is about allocation of JAs to justices. And Lady Rose, perhaps you could take this. It asks, does the allocation of JAs to justices happen after all of the JAs have been selected, or do individual justices have involvement earlier on in the recruitment process?
The allocation of justices and the pairing of justices and JAs takes place once we have decided which are the successful candidates. So we then have all the CVs and application forms of the JAs who are going to come to the court. And it's not an exact science, I would say, but so far it's worked very well. There are some pairings which sort of suggest themselves. So, for example, Lord Lloyd Jones is a Welsh speaker and will particularly deal with Welsh issues. And so if we have a JA candidate, successful candidate who has practiced in Wales or has Welsh connections, that may be an appropriate pairing. It can be more informal than that. We have one justice who's very keen on football, and if there is a JA who is also very keen on football, then we might put them together. But so far it has worked. I think everyone is keen to make a success of it. But yes, it's the pairings certainly do not direct who is going to be accepted or who isn't. That is a decision that's only taken once we know who all the successful candidates are.
Thanks so much, Lady Rose. The next question was, when does the role start if you're selected? And the answer to that is the 16th of September this year, and contracts run until the 1st of August 2025. Please do add any more questions to the chat. One thing I've often been asked is whether the JAs can see the justices' deliberations after court. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that. Perhaps Manat, you can take that.
Yes, of course. We don't deliberate with the justices after the hearings. Those are private meetings taken, and the justices share their views openly and freely and reach their own conclusion. What we often do get, which is always a wonderful insight, is a justice will sometimes pop round the JA room and give us a general lay of the land and outline to us where the bench and the conclusion that the bench has reached. We'll also often chat with our own justices around their opinions of the specific case, especially if they're going to write the judgment. As many of you will know, departing from the House of Lords practice, where often justices would write their own decisions, the Supreme Court is committed increasingly to issuing one judgment that reflects the position of the bench. And so in drafting the judgment, the justice might make various concessions or might need to consider the opinion of the bench at large when writing their decision. So you might have conversations with your justice tailored to addressing those concerns. But no, we don't actually hear the deliberations, which I think is different from the Court of Appeal as well.
I think maybe to add to that, we do hear the justices deliberate during the Permission to Appeal panel meetings, which is great fun, and I think a real insight into sort of how they discuss the cases, how they think about the law, and which points they find persuasive. So for me, that's one of the real highlights of the job. So we have a question. What, in your opinion, is the trait of an outstanding JA? Lady Rose, I know that you touched on this during your presentation, but I don't know if there's anything you'd add.
Yes, as I say, I think that it's that ability to have an intellectually honest and demanding conversation about a case. It's striking a right balance between being challenging, but also being respectful, which I think comes naturally to some people, but some people may have to work a little bit more at that. And I think it's also, I mean, all justices have to be very good at multitasking, because in my head at any given moment, I've got the two judgments which I'm writing, one of which is quite a long way along, one of which is only just the beginning. I've also got in my head the case that I heard today. I've got in my head a talk that I'm going to give on Friday and another talk that I'm giving on Monday. And then I'm shortly going to be preparing for the hearing that I've got next week, which I've looked at a little bit. So you have to have a very agile mind to jump from one thing to another, because in the course of a day, you do have a lot of different instances. And then you might have, at lunch, someone will come in and want to discuss something that they've been working on, which I may not have thought about for quite a long time if the hearing was a while ago. So you have to have that mental agility to keep lots of different balls juggling in the air and in your head as well. And it's great if the JA can match you with that. So when I have a meeting with Sam, we'll run through everything that I've got on my plate at the moment, and I expect him, and he certainly does, to be able to kind of switch to a different case and remember what that's about, and be able to discuss a particular point that I may have asked him to do some research on. So that's certainly one of the things which is very helpful, a quickness of thought as well as intellectual ability.
Thank
And you
you.
have to be able to get on as well. I mean, I've been very lucky I've been in the court. It'll be basically 3 years coming up in April. So I've really enjoyed the relationships I've had with each of the JAs, and you have to be able to let off a bit of steam sometimes, because it can be a very demanding and tiring job, and also have a laugh about things that have happened in the court, that have happened with the other justices, that have happened when I've done one of the many speaking engagements that I do. So that's also important.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question for Sam about international work, which is, do you have any opportunities to travel during your JA year?
Yes, we fortunately do. At the end of this month, all of the JAs are going on a very exciting trip to Washington, DC, where I think we get to attend 2 US Supreme Court hearings, and we get to chat with one of the justices there, and also get to go to a bunch of federal courts, I think both in Washington and Philadelphia. And I think that trip happens most years. I guess no guarantee that it happens every year. But yeah, definitely a major attraction of the role. And then I think, Rebecca, I'm right in adding that sometimes a JA goes to Strasbourg or Brussels to attend a ECHR themed conference.
Yes, in some years, a JA has attended a conference attended by all of the superior courts across the Council of Europe contracting states. And that I think 1 or 2 JAs have attended in the past few years, and that's been a fantastic experience. So lots of travel opportunities. Sorry, Stephanie, you're about...
Yeah, no, I didn't mention the Washington trip in my highlights, but in my speech, but it certainly is one of the highlights of the judicial assistant role, and having that insight into the US justice system at the highest levels, and being able to see the comparisons between the UK and the US justice system is incredibly informative, as well as obviously getting to meet some of the US Supreme Court justices as well, and have some very interesting and intellectually stimulating discussions with them.
So another question is, which areas of law would you most find coming across your desk as a JA? Manat, would you like to take that?
Yeah, sure. So as I kind of mentioned very briefly, you will see areas of law that you really hadn't anticipated coming across, and truly things that you might not know very much about to begin with. And so, your justice might have a particular interest in an area of law and might try to write judgments that reflect their own intellectual interests. But actually, what I found as well is that the judges are very open to learning about new areas of law and actually taking on decision writing and judgment writing in areas which are still novel to them. The wonderful effect of that is you get exposure to all kinds of law that you hadn't worked on or studied before. So you might work on, and the Privy Council cases are actually a really wonderful opportunity to experience things like criminal law or really complex security and fraud questions and commercial arrangements that come out of some of the territories as well. And so whilst I would like to tell you that you might do a dominant area of work, there might be a slight lean towards a commercial matter if you're working for a commercial justice. But my own experience has very much been that week on week it is as variable as promised. And if you find that the work isn't super varied on the judgment writing side, as kind of flagged earlier, the international questions that we get from other courts, your bench memos and that work, and then preparing for the permission to appeal application meetings also provides an opportunity to really throw yourself into learning about new questions. So I'm particularly interested in environmental protection and was given the opportunity to write one of the briefing papers on environmental protection in the UK and the various routes and to litigation that various claimants bring. And that was wonderful.
Another question is, do all JAs use the year to pivot into a new area of law, or do any continue with their previous career trajectory? Stephanie, do you want to comment on that, maybe based on your intake?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a real mixture. Quite a lot go back to practice in the same chambers or the same area of law that they were in before. And others absolutely do use it as a pivot into a new area. There were some solicitors in my intake who subsequently went to the bar afterwards. I also a barrister who ended up going to work in-house at a regulator. So I went back to private practice for a bit and then have ended up in the NGO sector. So yeah, there's a real mixture. And it absolutely provides an excellent springboard if you are looking to move direction, but equally still if you are just looking to carry on doing what you're doing, it obviously provides you with the skills that enable you to do that at a higher level as well.
Brilliant. This is my 4th year as a JA, and I'd agree with that. Some people have continued in their previous career trajectory, but I think with the confidence and the skills that the JA brings, it's sort of, they say that it's been super helpful to them and kind of enhancing what they had already. The next question is for Lady Rose. What do the justices wish that their JAs knew before they started?
I think that we have, because I'm on the selection panel, I have a fairly clear idea as to who it is who's arriving. But the justices, when they're allocated their JA, may know a lot or a little about it. I think we expect them not to have a huge amount of background experience. There are some things that surprise the justices when they arrive here, even though most of us have come up from the High Court and the Court of Appeal, either in England or Wales or in Northern Ireland or in Scotland. A lot about the job when I arrived here surprised me, particularly about the amount of Privy Council work that we do. And we know that the JAs who are arriving are just at the start of their careers, and that the important thing about this year is that it's a learning experience for them. So I don't think there's something which I have ever felt, well, he or she ought to have known that. If I could just go back a bit to one of the earlier questions about what kinds of cases you're going to have. There's most of the justices have a particular specialism. My specialism is competition law and also tax. Lord Sales, obviously a very eminent public lawyer. Lord Hamlin, as Manat has said, are more on the commercial shipping side. But there are only 12 of us, and we sit in benches of 5, so everybody sits on everything. And even though I might not have to write a judgment on a very abstruse commercial shipping case or a big public law case, I still have to be able at the deliberation to express my view about it, and I have to be able to contribute to the judgment. So although your justice may have a bit of a specialism, that's not going to dominate the kind of work you do. And I also think that there have been occasions where a JA is particularly interested in sitting on a particular case, and if their justice isn't sitting on that panel, it's certainly possible for them to sit in at the back of the court and watch that, and they may well be able to have a chat either with one of the justices who's sitting, or certainly with one of the JAs to one of the justices who is sitting. So it's kind of very flexible, and certainly you don't need to worry that if you're allocated a particular justice, oh, I'm just going to spend my whole time doing X or Y, or it's not how it works at all.
Thank you. And the next question, I think, is for Chris. What initiatives does the court have to promote diversity and inclusion within the workplace?
Well, we've got 3 minutes left, and that's a big topic to cover in 3 minutes. What I would recommend is that you have a look at our diversity and inclusion strategy that's on the website, and also our judicial strategy. It's something that it flows within the court, and it's at all levels, and it's something that we've spent a lot of time working on to really make sure that it's an inclusive environment and that we respect each other, but that we do all we can to just recognize that everyone's different and everyone's got something to bring to the court. And there's so much to cover, from the Bridging the Bar experience to experimenting with new different recruitment campaigns to try and attract underrepresented groups to the court. But I think it's truly driven as well by a wonderful chief executive who truly believes in diversity and inclusion and belonging, and that certainly makes, from an HR point of view, things flow a lot easier. And from the justices to all of our staff, I think everybody gets it, and that's wonderful. And I could do a whole session on diversity and inclusion, but I won't do that tonight.
I think, given that we've got 2 minutes left, I'd encourage everybody, as Chris said, to read the strategies, but also every year I think an update is published against the strategies, which details what concrete steps the court has taken in pursuit of the aims the strategy sets out. And I'd really encourage you to take a look at that and read about what we've been doing, and of course get in touch with any ideas about what we could do better. I think for now, I'd like to say thank you so much to all of our speakers for giving up their time this evening, and thanks to all of you for coming along and being interested in the JA role. I really hope that you'll consider applying. As our speakers have explained, it's a really fantastic opportunity. The deadline for applications is the 31st of March. I think my colleagues will place a link to the webpage from which you can apply in the chat. They'll also be sending out a short feedback survey after this event, so please do give us your feedback on how it went. Thanks so much, everyone.